When the mayor said she was building paradise, I didn't argue. I just looked at the elevation map, looked at her dam design, and quietly reinforced my fence. Because when water has nowhere to go, it remembers the path it was meant to take. And that path led straight through my ranch. My name's Jack Haywood. Fourth-generation rancher. I don't have a law degree, or a trust fund, or a yacht club membership. What I do have is land, 1,600 acres of it, wrapped around a valley shaped by time and one stubborn creek that only floods when you disrespect it. That creek was never a problem until Mayor Lorraine Carmichael came into office. She didn't care much for cattle or conservation. What she cared about was Silver Pine Estates, a high-end development for urban escapees who wanted to sip wine and tan lakeside while the rest of us worked the dirt. To make her lake dream real, she needed water. And to get water, she had to dam the creek. It was a bold move. But even bolder was where she built it, just above my land. I asked questions. I got ignored. I raised concerns. I got smiled at like a child. "Mr. Haywood," she said, "if the water shifts a little, you'll survive." That little shift nearly ruined me. Within 6 months, runoff from her project soaked the back half of my fields. Cattle feed turned to sludge. Roots rotted. My southern fence buckled from the weight of wet soil. I tried to hold the line, installed trenches, laid stone, rerouted what I could. But water's a quiet destroyer. It doesn't scream. It creeps in your foundation, drowns your pasture, then disappears like it was never there. I documented everything. Photos. Video. Water level logs. Layla, my cousin, sharp as hell with land law, told me to stay patient. Let them think you're losing, Jack. That's when they get sloppy. And so I waited. I waited while Silverpine held boat parades and launched Instagram pages. I waited while the mayor gave interviews about her eco-luxury innovation. But nature was waiting too, and unlike politicians, it doesn't forget where it's meant to flow. The first storm hit mid-September. Heavy. Sudden. Real Texas rain, the kind that tests concrete and confidence. I watched from my porch as her precious dam held, until it didn't. It started as a trickle. Then a roar. The water didn't just overflow, it reclaimed. The artificial lake spilled over the barrier, cut through manicured lawns, swallowed the community pool, and surged right back into its rightful course, through the basin, through the town, and right through the heart of Silverpine Estates. Basement alarms screamed. Expensive landscaping floated down the road like debris. And I stood dry. Every trench I dug worked. Every sandbag held. I'd fortified my ranch while she decorated her disaster. And as I watched drone footage of her luxury neighborhood turning into a swamp, I lit a fire, poured some whiskey, and said the words I'd been holding in my chest for a year: "I warned you." They tried to spin it, of course. Mayor Carmichael's office released a statement calling it a rare climate anomaly and an unexpected pressure event at the dam. Funny how weather becomes unexpected when you ignore floodplain warnings and build a vanity lake over ancient runoff. The press came in droves. Helicopters hovered over Silverpine Estates, capturing the image of wealth drowning itself, luxury patios underwater, designer patio furniture drifting into the golf course, and her proud ribbon-cutting bridge crumbling into silt. Meanwhile, up on higher ground, my ranch stood dry. Cows fed. Generators hummed. My boots stayed clean. Reporters asked for my comment. I just tipped my hat and said, "Nature always cashes the checks ego writes." That line made the 6 o'clock news. But the storm didn't just reveal water damage, it revealed lies. Layla and I had been holding back a full report, unauthorized dam alterations, missing environmental clearance paperwork, and water diversion plans buried so deep in bureaucratic jargon it made your head spin. Once we saw the mayor scrambling, we let it fly. Sent it to the State Water Authority. Sent it to 3 newspapers. Sent it to the governor's office. Within days, Oakmere's smiling queen of development became the face of rural negligence. Luxury mayor causes flood crisis, one headline read. The best part? I didn't break a single law. I didn't pull a single dirty trick. I just waited. And now, the same water she tried to trap was washing her name off every polished stone she planted. She held an emergency town hall 2 days later. What was supposed to be a calm, professional briefing turned into a full-on riot. Angry homeowners, people who paid millions for lakefront peace, demanded answers. Why weren't we warned? Why was there no evacuation plan? Why did my Tesla float down Main Street? And there she was, makeup cracking, hair soaked from humidity, fumbling through excuses while the floor beneath her literally creaked from water damage. She promised a rebuild. She promised new permits. But nobody was buying it anymore. The image was broken. The illusion gone. Her donors started pulling out. Her campaign manager quit. And in the back of that hall, arms folded, boots on tile, I stood and watched it all. I wasn't just a spectator, I was the man she underestimated. And now, her empire was buckling one wet floorboard at a time. That night, I sat under the stars, same chair on the porch, same glass of bourbon. The air smelled cleaner. Lighter. The kind of peace that comes only after a storm does your work for you. I didn't feel victorious. I felt vindicated. She had drowned a rancher's field to decorate a playground for people who thought mud only existed in spas. But the land? It remembered. It reclaimed. And it warned her the whole time. I didn't destroy her town. She did. I just watched. And now? I wasn't done. Because while she struggled to dry her marble floors, I had one more card to play, one that would turn her failed paradise into a legal nightmare she couldn't wriggle out of. I didn't just want her soaked. I wanted her stripped down to the paper trail. So while the mayor held her press conferences and tried to dry the mess with PR statements, Layla and I went hunting, digitally. We filed an open records request with the city for all water management documentation tied to Silverpine Estates. Took them 10 days to respond. When they did, it came in a drive full of redactions, missing PDFs, and vague engineering references. That's when Layla smiled. They're hiding something. She dug in deep. Tracked emails, flagged building code revisions, cross-referenced timestamps. And there it was, a single permit revision, mid-project, that rerouted excess runoff toward the southern basin. My basin. It was signed by her deputy manager under emergency authority, 3 months before the storm, and stamped, confidential infrastructure adjustment. Translation. They knew it would flood me. They just hoped no one would notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. That's what ranchers do, we pay attention. We feel the earth shift before the boots do. I printed that document, drove to the county supervisor's office, and laid it on his desk. Read that out loud, I said. He paled by the second line. Is this real? He whispered. Every word, I replied. And now it's your move. By noon, the county launched a formal investigation. By sundown, it hit the local news. Mayor secretly rerouted floodwater onto private land. Her face was everywhere. On phones. On bar TVs. Even on a billboard someone graffitied to say, Queen of the Lake. More like Drownin' Lorraine. I didn't lift a finger. I just turned over her own paperwork, and the land did the rest. Silverpine turned on her fast. The luxury homeowners who once toasted her on paddleboards now slammed her in lawsuits. Real estate firms pulled listings. Contractors abandoned half-finished homes. Buyers demanded refunds. And she got mean. Started throwing staff under the bus. Fired her deputy. Blamed engineers. Blamed the weather. But the documents didn't lie. They had her name on them. And once the State Environmental Board got wind of the forgery, they froze funding for every future project she had her hands on. What once was her kingdom had turned into a swamp, legally and literally. Layla told me we had enough for a civil suit, maybe even criminal negligence. I told her to file both. We don't stop at flooding, I said. We drain every lie she ever poured into this land. That night, I stood by the edge of my property and stared at the waterline. It had dropped. Slowly, steadily. The land was recovering. But it still carried the stain of what she did. You could see it in the eroded tree roots, the cracked fence posts, the patches where the grass hadn't come back. The mayor might have thought this was about development, progress, image, power. But this was always about respect. She violated the land. She buried a creek to lift a mansion. She mocked my warnings and redirected the flood to my door. And now, I was the one rebuilding. While she was about to face the kind of storm you can't explain away with a press release. The land doesn't lie. And neither do the receipts. It was a Thursday morning when the sheriff's cruiser pulled up my drive. I didn't flinch. Didn't even stop splitting logs. He got out slow, hat in hand, papers under his arm. "Jack," he said, "I'm here to serve you, as a witness." I nodded. That's what we've been waiting for. The subpoenas had come down. State officials were building a case against Mayor Lorraine Carmichael for abuse of power, falsification of public documents, and unlawful diversion of water resources. And I was at the center of it. My land. My losses. My voice. I signed the papers. Gave my statement. Walked the agents through every inch of flood damage, fence to fence, barn to field. They took photos. Soil samples. Drone footage. You could see it all, clear as day, the unnatural flow, the eroded trenches, the kill line of soaked roots where the redirected surge hit hardest. The soil doesn't lie. And neither did I. Lorraine tried to rally what support she had left. Went on a local radio show, crying on air, talking about political attacks and being blindsided by her own staff. But it was too late. Her own deputy turned state's witness. Told investigators that Lorraine had personally approved the emergency runoff redirection when the lake started filling faster than expected. Said she chose the ranch because it was open space with no political leverage. Open space. That's what she thought of my land. My legacy. My bloodline. The place where my father taught me how to mend a fence, where I buried my first dog, where my son took his first steps in red mud. She didn't just flood a field. She violated a memory. And now the state knew it too. Layla filed our civil suit that same week, $2.7 million in damages, emotional distress, property devaluation, and environmental loss. The number wasn't random. It was calculated down to every ruined fence post, every drowned calf, every bushel lost in the waterlogged fields. We added witness testimony, photos, soil tests, even the blocked emergency drainage system that her crews secretly installed to keep Silver Pine's water from backing up into their precious driveways. Her lawyers tried to delay. Claimed procedural error. But we'd done this before. And this time, the public wasn't on her side. Local farmers rallied behind me. Protesters gathered outside City Hall with signs that read, "You damned the wrong man," and "Cows over condos." Even the news started calling me the rancher who fought back. But I wasn't fighting for a headline. I was fighting to remind people that land isn't just dirt. It's memory. It's blood. It's family. And when someone tries to drown that for profit, there's a cost. Not just in dollars, but in dignity. And Lorraine? She was about to pay both. Every legal motion. Every headline. Every drop of water she unleashed now turned against her. Nature always takes back what it's owed. Sometimes slow. Sometimes sudden. But always certain. And while she scrambled to keep her throne dry, I kept watching the land. Because the flood she started wasn't finished yet. And the deeper truth? It hadn't even reached its high water mark. The first offer came in a yellow envelope, slid under my ranch gate like a coward's handshake. Inside was a typed letter from Lorraine's legal team offering me $250,000, in good faith, if I agreed to drop all charges, end public statements, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. $250,000. After she tanked 2 harvests, displaced my herd, and turned my family's name into a footnote in her flood map? No. She wasn't offering a settlement, she was offering silence. And silence is one thing I don't sell. I mailed the letter back, unopened, with a note, "This land speaks. I don't have to." Then I called Layla and told her to double the damages in our lawsuit. "Make it hurt," I said. "Make her remember." Silverpine Estates was rotting from the inside out. Luxury homes were now swamp-locked shells. Mold, termites, cracked foundations. Insurance companies started bailing. Properties listed at $1.8 million were now being auctioned off for a fraction, if anyone dared buy them. Lorraine's dream was collapsing brick by brick. And while she begged for FEMA grants and private investors to save face, I got a letter from the state. They were pressing formal environmental crime charges against her and her deputy. The headlines wrote themselves. Mayor indicted in luxury flood scheme. My favorite one. Silverpine sinks. Rancher rises. I cut it out and framed it in the barn. She finally showed up in person. Unannounced. Black SUV, 2 aides, walking onto my land like she still had authority here. I met her at the gate. She didn't even get a hello in before she started pleading. "Mr. Haywood, we were both victims of an unpredictable event." I stared at her, arms crossed. "No, ma'am. You were the architect. I was the consequence." She talked in circles. About reputations. About rebuilding. About how she never meant for it to go this far. I let her speak. Let her sweat. Then I pointed to the creek behind her. "You see that bend? That's where the water first hit my barn. It's also where your bridge used to be. Funny thing about water, it always finds a way back home." She left without saying another word. And I knew then, she was broken. Not from guilt. From losing control. That night, thunder rolled again across the valley. Rain tapped the tin roof while I sat by the fire, the dogs at my feet, and the air thick with peace. I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won. She had wanted to build paradise by bending nature into a pretty, sellable package. I let her. And when nature pushed back, as it always does, she learned the hard way what happens when you flood a man's legacy for a shallow fantasy. You don't just lose your property. You lose your name. Your footing. Your future. And me? I'm still here. Boots on dry ground. Watching the land reset itself. Watching the town that tried to drown me finally face the flood it created. And smiling, because I warned her. And because justice, out here, flows slow, but it never forgets. By the end of fall, Silverpine Estates looked like a forgotten war zone. The same white stone villas once bragged about in glossy brochures now stood cracked and peeling, windows boarded, driveways buried in dried silt. Realtors stopped answering calls. Contractors demanded unpaid fees. And Lorraine? She'd vanished from public life. Her mansion on the hill, still dry, still smug, had become a fortress of silence. But justice has a way of echoing louder in silence than in shouting. Word came down that she was stripped of office by a unanimous council vote. 1 month later, indicted on 4 counts: environmental tampering, unlawful land use, falsified permits, and criminal negligence. Each charge a nail in the coffin of her empire. And the final blow? A class action lawsuit filed by her own investors. I watched it all unfold from the porch, sipping my coffee while the world finally listened to the land. I didn't stop there. I filed for a state conservation designation on my lower fields, the ones she flooded. The same land she once called wasted potential. And guess what? It passed. The state designated 320 acres of my ranch as a protected watershed, permanently shielded from future development. I turned her disaster into a monument. Called it Haywood Creek Preserve. Visitors came to see it. Schools took field trips. Newspapers wrote pieces about the rancher who turned a flood into a legacy. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about a lawsuit or a dam. This was about teaching everyone who watched what happens when you don't respect the land. It doesn't get mad. It doesn't sue you. It waits. Then it moves, with purpose. People started writing me letters. Farmers. Veterans. Small-town folks who'd been pushed around by big money and local power. You gave us hope, they said. You showed it's possible to win without sinking to their level. I read every one. Some I answered. Some I just kept. Stored them in an old ammo box under my desk, alongside a rusted horseshoe and my father's belt buckle. Because those weren't just letters, they were proof. Proof that standing your ground still meant something in a world of handshakes behind closed doors and concrete where trees once stood. And the best part? The land was healing. Grass returned. Fence lines firmed. The creek flowed like it always had, unbothered, untamed, unstoppable. One afternoon, I walked the edge of the preserve alone. Clouds rolled overhead. The breeze was clean, sharp, honest. I looked out at the place that almost drowned me, and all I saw was peace. And promise. Lorraine tried to build a future that didn't belong. I rebuilt a future that remembered. That honored every drop of water, every cracked root, every warning she ignored. She tried to drown a rancher's voice in the name of progress. But this land? It didn't silence me. It amplified me. And the more she lost, the louder the truth became. The ranch still stood. The mayor had fallen. And nature? It never took sides. It just waited, until it could finally speak. Oakmere used to ignore me. I was the rancher outside the city line, the man they only remembered when they wanted beef donations for fundraisers or a scenic backdrop for campaign flyers. But after the flood, after Lorraine's fall, things changed. Suddenly, I wasn't just Jack Haywood, I was the man who stood when no one else did. The same council that once rolled over for the mayor now called to thank me for my resilience. Local schools invited me to speak about land rights. One even asked if they could name a trail in the preserve after me. I didn't need the recognition. But the land? It deserved every ounce of respect it had been denied. So I said yes. But I made one request: don't name it after me. Name it after my father, Colt's Crossing. He taught me everything I knew about the earth, about standing tall. The land remembered him. So should they. As for Lorraine, she went quiet. Her mansion was seized to cover mounting legal fees. Last I heard, she'd moved to another state, trying to rebrand herself as an environmental consultant. I nearly choked on my coffee. The irony was so thick, you could spread it on toast. But I didn't waste time chasing her downfall. I had acres to restore, fencing to finish, and a community to rebuild, one rooted in truth, not vanity. The men who'd once looked at me like I was in the way now came for advice on soil health and water retention. Funny, isn't it? The same people who laughed at my boots now asked how to walk the land without offending it. We launched education programs through the preserve. Kids planted native trees. Families walked the floodline trail. We left markers where the water once rose, not to scare, but to teach. I watched a teenage girl run her fingers along the bark of a cedar tree I planted the same month Lorraine's dam burst. Her mom whispered, "This is the tree that came after the flood." That moment hit harder than any courtroom win. Because that's what legacy really is, not a headline, not a check, not even a plaque. It's something quiet. Deep. Living. It's a lesson written into the land itself, passed down through roots and footprints. Lorraine tried to rewrite that story in concrete and lies. But all she did was give it a new chapter, and a louder ending. That evening, I stood on the ridge where I once watched the flood roll in. Same hat. Same boots. But this time, the world was different. The town below was quieter, humbler. And the land? The land was listening. It always had. It watched her build her dam. It watched her mock my warnings. And when it finally spoke, it didn't shout, it surged. Now, it was calm again. Flowing steady through channels it always knew. And me? I was still standing. Not just a survivor, but a steward. Not a victim of her pride, but a reminder that the earth doesn't belong to the loudest voice, it belongs to the one who never stopped listening. Winter came in quiet this year. No storms. No sirens. Just clear skies and cold mornings where the grass crackled under your boots and the creek whispered instead of roared. The water had finally settled into its natural rhythm, no longer trapped behind cement or twisted through man-made bends. It flowed like it used to, like it always meant to. That's how you know the land's healing, not when it looks perfect, but when it remembers itself. I walked those banks daily. Each step reminded me what was lost, and what I'd refused to give up. Lorraine flooded my fields to build an illusion, but the land turned her illusion into evidence. And now, every tree I planted, every fence I rebuilt, every step I took forward, that was the real rebuild. Not with blueprints. With roots. A documentary team came out to film the story. Young folks, respectful, full of questions. "Did you ever think you'd win?" one asked. I looked out at the pasture, where calves kicked through the frost like they were born dancing, and said, "I didn't win. The land did. I just stayed long enough for people to see it." They filmed me walking the trail, standing by the old flood line, and showing the markers we'd installed with Layla's help. One read, "Where the water rose, the truth surfaced." Another, "Nature waits. Then it remembers." The crew cried when they read that one. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something deeper than satisfaction. I felt restored. Layla told me we had 2 final settlements left to process. One from the insurance consortium backing Silverpine's developers. The other from the federal oversight agency that audited the mayor's budget and found gross negligence in public spending. She said it like it was a task on a checklist. But I paused. Because that was the last of it. The last paper. The last reckoning. The money would come. Repairs would continue. But the war was officially over. And strangely, I didn't feel relief. I felt ready. Ready for what came next. Ready to turn this chapter into something more than just revenge. Because this wasn't just a personal victory. It was a public reminder. That even when people try to bury the truth under permits and concrete, the land never forgets. It rises. It reveals. And it reclaims. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the stars blink into place one by one. Same porch. Same sky. But everything else had changed. Not because I burned the system down, but because I endured it. I outlasted it. The creek ran below, soft and steady, threading its way through the preserve like a scar turned sacred. I raised my glass toward it. "You did good," I said. And I meant it. Because the flood that nearly destroyed me didn't just expose corruption, it rebuilt something bigger. It built a future that couldn't be bought, paved, or spun. It built a truth too solid to drown. And it started, as all things worth keeping do, with a man, a piece of land, and a promise: this ground will stand. Spring came softer this time. The creek didn't rage. It rolled, easy, steady, like it knew its job had been done. The grass came in early, wildflowers shot through the fence line, and birds started nesting in trees that hadn't stood dry in years. There was no ceremony, no fireworks, just the quiet satisfaction of land that had been returned to itself. I hosted a ranch tour for a group of students that month, city kids mostly, curious eyes and shiny sneakers. One asked if this was the place that beat the flood. I smiled and said, no. This is the place that survived the lie. That's what I wanted people to remember. Not just the lawsuit or the dam collapse. But the truth. That when you stand long enough, steady enough, the storm passes. And what remains, is yours. The local paper ran a final story before the anniversary hit. They called it, 1 year later, how a rancher outlasted a mayor and made a monument out of mud. I read it once, then folded it up and stuffed it behind the seat of my truck. Not because I was ashamed, because I didn't need a newspaper to tell me what I already knew. The land had spoken. The town had listened. And Lorraine? She was a ghost now. Her name was still tied to lawsuits, but in Oakmere, she'd become a cautionary tale whispered at council meetings: don't pull a Lorraine. That's legacy too, I guess. The kind no one wants to leave behind. Layla brought her daughter out to the ranch that weekend. Said she wanted her to see what standing your ground looks like. The girl, no older than 7, wandered along the trail and stopped at the flood marker. She stared at it for a long while, then asked, did the water really come all the way up here? I said, higher. Her eyes widened, and she whispered, but it's gone now. I knelt beside her and placed her hand on the soil. It's not gone. It's waiting. Just like the truth. You can push it down. You can try to dam it up. But if you don't treat it right, it'll rise. Always. She didn't say much after that. Just nodded. But I saw it sink in. The way the land teaches, not with words, but with presence. That evening, I walked the ridge line one more time. The same spot I'd watched her dam rise, the same spot I'd watched it fall. The sun dipped low, bleeding orange across the preserve, and I thought of all that had changed, and all that hadn't. My boots still fit. My hands still knew this dirt. The creek still flowed. But now, the people saw it too. Not as scenery. As truth. As witness. Lorraine built her empire out of concrete and cameras. I built mine from roots. And while hers cracked and crumbled, mine held. Because this land never needed a mayor's blessing to matter. It just needed time. And a man willing to outwait the flood. 1 year to the day. I marked it not with speeches, but with silence. No press. No fanfare. Just me, the land, and the sound of the creek flowing the way it was meant to. The same rain fell as it had the year before, but this time, there was no panic. No water crashing through my pasture. No scramble to save the herd. Because now, the land had been returned to balance. And I'd built more than berms and trenches. I'd built memory into the dirt. I walked the trail alone that morning, hand on the fence, boots steady on the earth that tried to swallow me. But couldn't. Lorraine thought she could bend nature with concrete and charm. I didn't bend. And when the water rose, it didn't drown me, it delivered me. The mayor was gone, her name scrubbed from every official sign, every office door, every committee she once sat on. Silver Pine Estates. Demolished. Declared unfit for redevelopment. A failed utopia turned cautionary tale. The state reclaimed the land and returned it to agricultural use, my suggestion. Funny how that works. The very earth she tried to monetize was now feeding the town. And me? I stayed where I'd always been. Right here. No press tour. No book deal. Just a rancher who refused to let someone else's ambition become his flood. Visitors still come, walking the same path she once tried to bury. They ask questions. They read the signs. Some laugh at the irony. Others just stare, quiet and still, like the land itself is whispering something to them. And it is. It always is. Because the earth remembers. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in truth. You try to cage it, it breaks free. You try to silence it, it speaks through roots, through rain, through reckoning. That's what Lorraine never understood. This wasn't about property. It was about promise. And you don't flood a man's promise and expect to walk away dry. So here I stand. Same boots. Same porch. Different world. A world where truth rose like the water she tried to suppress. A world where I didn't just survive, I restored. The ranch is stronger now. The town wiser. The creek quieter, but never silenced. And me? I'll be here. Watching the horizon. Guarding the ground. And if anyone ever tries again to flood what's sacred for the sake of what's shiny, I won't have to fight. The land will remember what happened last time. And it'll rise again. If that story gave you chills, it means you felt it like. Hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated and came back stronger. Subscribe for more real stories where the little guy doesn't just survive, he wins. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if someone tried to erase your legacy with a lie? And remember, sometimes, you don't need to fight dirty, you just need to let the truth flood back in.